Hello, good evening. I'm Dr. Janice Morrow with American Mood Swings, and tonight we have Dr. Fareed Banimad from the American Addiction Institute of Mind Medicine here in Irvine, California. So he is an addiction specialist and he has a background in ER medicine, and we're very grateful that he's here tonight. He's a well of knowledge, and we're going to start season 1, episode 1 of American Mood Swings talking about opioid addiction. It is a national emergency. Thousands of people are dying, and most people have no idea why. They just know that we see this on the news every night. Almost every family has been affected in some way or another, whether it's a child, a parent, a loved one, friend, colleague. Some of our most talented and beloved artists, such as Prince, have died from these horrible drugs, and we want you to have a walk away from tonight's episode having a much better understanding of what's happening in your brain and body when you're taking these substances and why they're so deadly. Dr. Fareed Banimad, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We're so grateful. So we're going to just jump right in. There's a lot to cover. So let's get to some of the root causes. You've mentioned some of these in your videos, so
we can just sort of pick one out of the lot and just use opiates. And I'm going to use opiates and opioids interchangeably for those that are going to be nitpicky out there, but I'm going to use them, I'm just going to say opiates. So let's use that as an example as a drug of addiction or a substance of addiction. And let's ask, well, what is the root cause of that? And there's different ways we can approach and answer this, right? Because we are, 7, 8 years into the quote-unquote opiate epidemic. Millions and billions have been put into this endeavor, all the way from the federal to the state to local governments, agencies, and so forth. And yet, just a couple of years ago, we broke 100,000 deaths. Now, during those deaths, many people can simply say, well, there was COVID, so opiate abuse and mental health issues sort of went through the roof. I would say, wrong. COVID unmasked the deficiencies in our infrastructure, our system, all of our issues. I'm going to put that aside because we don't have time to really get into that, but let's go back. We just had 100,000 deaths. It's not COVID by itself. It has a lot of systematic sort of confounding issues. The question is, what are the causes of addiction? And if you know the cause, you would think you can extinguish it or at least modify it and approach it in a way where you decrease it, but our numbers are going up. It's kind of silly to presume and assume that that inanimate object has some intrinsic cognitive facility that's creating addiction. Yes, we can talk about it at the receptor level. Yes, we can talk about pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, neural networks, physiology, and how your body starts to physiologically crave something more and more and more. But it's still a little bit silly. Why do I say that? You know, earlier on, before we started shooting, I mentioned cocaine, right? If you go in the Andes, right, the cocaine's been around for thousands of years. You don't see people walking around fiending for this stuff. And in the old textbooks, it would say the most addicting substance is cocaine. And we're all old enough to know what happened in the 80s and the influx of cocaine, Miami, the crime, and, you know, the massive addiction that really started the addiction industry in the 90s. And I would say that when we talk about what is the root cause of addiction, I can talk about it at the individual level, right? What's going on with that individual person? What's going on with their psychological disposition, their intrapsychic dynamics, their physiology, their genetics? We can talk about it at that level. Then we can look at small groups, like what is their interfamily dynamics or immediate social interaction dynamics that imposes itself under a psychological disposition or their physiology. But what you really see is the root causes of substance abuse are societal and institutional. And they set us up for a pathological process, one of which is substance abuse. And I'm going to leave it right there. I will point out to one thing. Emil Durkheim sociologist, turn of the century, the father of modern sociological theory, because he was the first one to introduce statistics to sociological studies. He wrote a book called Suicide. In there he discusses, doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. In every case, in every strata of society, there was a more likelihood of suicide when he introduced this concept called anomie. People can look it up. I describe it as disconnectedness and loneliness. And what do we have but increasing disconnectedness, increasing loneliness at every level of our society, which eventually distills down to the individual.